You're connected to Business Wrap. Find us online at businesswrap.biz, on Twitter using handle AskBizWrap, and on Facebook just search Business Wrap. And now, Be Insured with Luke Mardigian, presented by Farm Bureau Insurance.
Hello, and thank you for listening. My name is Luke Mardigian, and you are listening to Be Insured, a show where we discuss a variety of topics related to insurance, business leadership, and so forth, so you can stay protected while growing a thriving business. And we're talking to our business owners today. Insurance is scary. It is intimidating. You want to spend your time running your business, not worrying about whether the agent who's knocking on your door is just trying to make a quick buck or actually protect you. Look out for your best interests. And there are several types of coverage that your small business needs in order to make sure that you're protected. And we're going to talk about that today. But first, let me introduce my guests.
Roger Graff, Vice President of Claims, Farm Bureau Insurance.
Justin Maxim with Chase Bylenga, Holst in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Ben Vrobel with Camelot Service Company in Lansing.
All right, how to navigate insurance as a small business or just as a business in general. I think the more I deal with large organizations, there's a lot of crossover. There may be more complexities at, say, a doctor's office that has 10 locations as opposed to a contractor who has one. Ben, you know, your business is one of those businesses that have a lot of moving parts. You're a restoration contractor. You have 2 locations. You have lots of vehicles, lots of employees. What's one of your bigger stressors when it comes to insurance?
A lot of it actually is more liability, because we always have that scare, like we're trying to avoid getting into a liability suit always, but you know, making sure that we have enough coverage for potentially working on a job that is involved with a lot of high dollar stuff and could have a big loss, and just making sure that you're properly insured for that.
Yeah, you know, for you, I always think about, you know, like if you're doing a pipe repair in a condo and there's 40 units in that building and it's a $6 million building, and it's your air mover that sparks and starts a fire and burns the whole thing down. Okay, what are we gonna do now if the insurance company who insures the condo association comes after you? You know, the other one that I think about with you all the time, because your territory is so big, is just that auto liability side of things. You know, do you have enough coverage if one of your employees ends up hurting somebody in an accident?
Yeah, that's another scare too, because it happens more times than you would think, and it's happened recently to friends of ours that are in the same industry, you know, ironically enough, where one of their vans pulled out and hit somebody, and that person lost their life, and it was not a pretty situation, and it was a big suit. And so, you know, it's always in the back of your mind, and you always want to make sure that you have enough for something like that, because those people in that situation were not properly insured, and they were losing a lot of sleep at night knowing that they could be forking out a lot of money out of their own pockets to, you know, make up for the damages caused by that incident.
Yep, absolutely. I absolutely believe that business owners should be getting a great price on insurance. But I always ask business owners, do you want to pay for insurance now or pay for it later? And they always go, what do you mean? Well, do you want to pay for it now and maybe pay just a little more than what you're currently paying but have the right coverage, or do you want to pay for it later when you get a judgment against your business and now 10-20% of your revenue is gone every month? And how are you going to function? Who are you going to lay off? And how are you going to sleep at? How are you going to make your mortgage payment? You know, having that liability level set at the right place really just avoids all of that. And liability is so darn cheap. Mm-hmm. It's really not an area that you need to skimp on.
Yeah, that's especially for small businesses, that's a big decision for them to make is, hey, we don't have a bunch of cash flow right now. We're trying to build this business. Can I afford these higher premiums? You can't afford not to have them. You know, like we had chatted about, if you own a vehicle in Michigan, there's owner's liability. So you are automatically liable for the negligence that transpires from the operator. So you can do everything right, be sitting back at your shop, and somebody operating your vehicle gets in an accident and you're liable for it. So,
yep, absolutely. And pricing on on the, on liability type stuff, it just varies so much from company to company. And at the end of the day, you have to find an agent that you can trust, that's looking out for your best interest, who can also get you the best price on that coverage. Shameless plug. I know our liability is very inexpensive at Farm Bureau. It makes it kind of a no-brainer for you to tack on an umbrella.
I know, and you're talking about the the proper coverage, and we see small businesses, they start out and they don't look at a business auto policy. They're going to run with a personal auto policy, and there's exclusions right in there regarding business. So you got to be very, very careful with that. So you start out in a business, and then the proper business classification in terms of a incorporation and S corp, things of that nature, versus a DBA to where you're personally exposed. Those are very, very important things. And even though the agent might not be the attorney, if you will, in terms of guiding what perhaps you should be, what entity you should be, at least from an insurance standpoint, that's kind of where it starts out.
Yeah, absolutely. The sole proprietor filing with your county as a DBA is just a thing of the past. Our society is far too litigious to take on that personal liability for your business. And it's kind of a big boy business type thing, like, hey, we're a big boy business. We have an LLC, or we have an S corp, C corp, whatever it is that you choose to do. One of the most common things that I see missing from business policies is coverage for the items that leave their place of business. So that, like Ben, for instance, you have a location in Portage. It's a nice building, and you have a ton of equipment that you store in there every night. But when the rains hit hard in spring in Michigan and every basement in Michigan's flooding, all that equipment is out. How much have you kind of in your mind stressed out about how much equipment you have and where it's at and when are you going to get it?
I mean, to be completely honest, it's the last thing on my mind when all that work's going. Because it's just trying to get to the next person. For me, and I think for a lot of business owners, your insurance agent is part of your team, just like your accountant, just like your attorney. I might not be communicating with you every day, but somebody from my office is usually sending you something saying, hey, we need
pretty much every day.
We need a certificate of insurance sent to so-and-so, that we're doing work for. And, it also goes back to having enough coverage, liability, smaller companies that might be taking on bigger work that are requiring a higher umbrella or something. Where do you draw that line as to what you could afford and what you can't afford? And
yep.
So,
yeah. And, when I think about your business in particular, Ben, and there's a ton of them out there that I could think of, film production companies that we work with and a variety of things. But, when your equipment's off site, you shouldn't have to worry about it.
Right.
Each item should be insured. I think that's the cheapest part of your policy, honestly.
Sure.
And you got a lot of equipment. Mm-hmm. So if a regular base policy, and Roger, maybe you can speak to that, a regular base business policy isn't going to cover your stuff off of your location.
No, what happens with a base, and it depends on the business policy. There's small business policies called business owner policies, or BOPs, and those are kind of, there's a bunch of coverages that are afforded in that versus, a larger business would take on everything a la carte. So if you get this policy that kind of has a little bit of everything, Luke makes a great point that it does, it covers a little bit of everything, but you have to be very careful because from an exposure standpoint, when the exposure is at your business, it's a lower exposure, it's a lower risk. And then when it ends up out in the field, that's a higher risk. So from an insurance perspective, it's about collecting the proper premium for the exposure. So you're right. You're going to be very limited, and you may not have any. You might think, well, I see $5,000 there coverage for business personal property, but read the whole section because it talks about being on premises.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and on premises is at your business.
Yeah, and not only do we have equipment that goes into our vans or trucks and goes out and goes into other people's homes or places of business, but we have equipment that's attached to our vans that are
right.
PTO driven, extraction tools and things of that nature, that it's important that you let your insurance company or your agent know that you have those things because they don't know the ins and outs of your business and what could be in the vehicle that they're insuring. And
that's a great point, Ben, because we have seen in recently where, there's a vehicle that had, all kinds of things in it, and it dramatically increase the value. But we're looking at it, we have no idea, what's in that. So, depending upon, how it's going to be covered, the most important thing is that it is covered, and that is the relationship with the agent, that the agent knows your business. As a business owner, the agent has to know your business. Absolutely.
To go from real basics of equipment attached to vans to something really complex. And Roger, I'd love to hear your perspective on this. The most common thing that I'm running across with business owners, aside from not having their items covered off premise, is that they have it's relatively new, a cyber exposure. I sat with an attorney the other day, and we've insured her for a few years. And I said, your policy is great. I think we did a great job setting this up to begin with. We don't really need to change much. But how much personal stuff do you keep on your computers? And she does family law. So she goes, I have a lot of personal stuff on our computers.
So when you talk about cyber liability, I mean, that is very important, because it is about, not only your information, but it's it's your client's information. It's other entities' information that you're responsible for. So, and it's very, I mean, it's a up and coming exposure, if you will, where, there are companies that are, the only thing they write is cyber liability coverage. They write nothing else but that, because of, depending upon the exposure that you have. But it's a big deal, and you don't want to get caught without it, because you're exposed. You have, and the crazy thing about cyber liability is that it's information that, it's one thing that if you take possession of somebody's, if you're a dry cleaner, for instance, and take somebody's shirts and pants, and, you're doing it, and there's a fire and it's burned, then you owe those people back because you have possession. It's a Bailey situation, if you will. You have possession of their stuff. But, go beyond that and look at all these accounts that you have and all this information that you have. And that's where you really got to look at it.
Yeah. I mean, if somebody, and it's happening every day, where businesses are walking in on Monday morning and all their computers are locked, and it has some weird meme on it that says, pay up or else. And they're demanding 20,000 Bitcoins, which I don't even know how much money that is, but
that's a lot of money.
Yeah, I can imagine. So most small businesses aren't going to want to just convert their cash to Bitcoins and pay out to some guy in Russia. But that is exactly what companies are doing, and cyber liability can pay for that. I mean, the companies that specialize it, they literally have Bitcoin accounts for reserves.
What you're describing is ransomware.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it is. And that they'll come in, we've seen it, they'll come in, they'll lock down the system, and then exactly what you said. And we saw a company that, had to run, to another part of the state to purchase Bitcoin in order to pay it, because Bitcoin can't be traced.
Yep. That's the whole point of that.
Now I'm worried about heading back to the office and all that.
Yeah, you should be. Talk to some people,
so.
Make sure you have it. It's the real deal. It's a real issue. And it could cost, I mean, little things like that people don't know. The law requires you to notify your clients whose information was breached. And if you don't do that, it's a huge fine. Well, insurance policies pay to print off information and mail it out to all your clients and notify them and do it all appropriately, because that's what they do.
That's why you'll see, I mean, large corporations that have been breached, and you'll see where, there's a statement that goes out and they'll say, 8 million customers may be exposed. I mean, they have an obligation to do that.
Yep, by law. The third most common gap that I see with business owners is professional liability. For contractors, errors and omissions, attorneys, malpractice, doctors, malpractice. For insurance agents, it's errors and omissions. And, I'd love one of our guests to kind of speak to professional liability and why it's so important.
Well, I can speak on that kind of from a mold remediation standpoint.
Yep.
We do mold remediation, and generally we work with a consultant or an industrial hygienist that comes in and does air quality assessments and writes a protocol for us to follow. So if your errors and omissions or liability that way, a lot of it's more or less placed on him being the consultant guiding us. But, if we leave something behind or we don't do our job properly, and then the people move back in, they have a reaction, they're still probably going to come back after everybody that was involved.
Absolutely.
So having that professional liability is very important for us, and it's really expensive. So people, the consumer, the customer doesn't necessarily generally understand why the cost of mold remediation is so expensive, but there's a lot of liability involved in that, and the cost to insure us for that is really expensive as well.
And there's different forms of it, and one is contractors' errors and omissions, and what Ben has described. And basically, what it does is it covers your work, from a professional standpoint. So if you were go out to do a job and you don't do it right, that's kind of where it kicks in.
That's a great point. So, business owners, make sure that you have proper liability limits. Make sure your stuff that leaves your business is covered, and do your very best to have professional liability, because everybody makes mistakes. And if that mistake happens, you really don't want to leave your clients high and dry. This has been Be Insured with Luke Mardigian.